This is the podcast to improve your English listening skills while learning something new in English. Every episode, we bring you interesting topics in simple and clear English, so you can listen, learn, and grow. So, sit back, relax, and let's get started.
All right, welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going way back to the first century CE.
First century CE.
In Nusantara.
Yeah.
Which, for those of you who don't know, is basically the Indonesian archipelago.
Yeah, the ancient Indonesian archipelago.
Yeah, so kind of a huge area and a really important area.
Absolutely.
Our sources for this time period are really interesting because it's this foundational period.
A foundational era.
And we can really see, a lot of things happening, like trade and
bustling trade.
And the beginnings of kingdoms.
The stirrings of early kingdoms.
And huge cultural shifts.
Yeah.
So what we're really going to try to do today is see if we can figure out what these major transformations were.
Yeah.
And, why should anybody care?
Right, exactly.
What does this have to do with anything?
Yeah, why is this relevant for us today?
Yeah, because, this seems like a really long time ago.
It does seem like a distant past, but, it's really important.
Yeah.
Because it lays the groundwork for so much of what came later in the region.
So it's not like an isolated pocket of history or anything.
Exactly. What happened back then has echoes that resonate through the centuries,
Okay, so when we think about Nusantara in the first century, our sources really point to this idea that it was a crossroads. It wasn't just some, backwater.
Right.
It was the central place.
Absolutely.
So what made it so central?
Well, its location, its strategic location, made it a crossroads for trade.
Okay, so it was like a hub.
Yeah, especially between India and China.
So India and China were huge back then, right?
And were empires, big players.
And Nusantara was right in the middle of it all.
Right in the middle, yeah. Like the Malacca Strait.
The Malacca Strait.
Yeah, that was a super important sea lane.
Oh.
A vital artery for commerce.
So it wasn't just goods moving through, right?
No, not just goods. It was also a cultural exchange.
Ah, okay. And especially with India.
Particularly with India, yeah. You see, the traders brought more than just commodities. They brought religion, like Hinduism and Buddhism, new writing systems, even ideas about how to govern, how to rule.
So that's interesting because when we think about foreign influence, we often think about conquest.
Right, colonialism.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not really what our sources are saying.
No, not at all. This was much more about peaceful trade and cultural exchange. It wasn't about forcing anything on anybody. It was about sharing and adapting.
Okay, so the local leaders basically picked and chose what they wanted to adopt.
Precisely. They adopted what worked for them, like Hinduism.
Yeah.
The concept of kingdoms, having a Raja, a king.
Right.
And even the Pallava script. This is one of the earliest writing systems in Southeast Asia.
Okay, and that came from India.
From South India, yeah. It's amazing to think about. They integrated all of this with their own cultures.
And that's important, right? That they weren't just passive recipients.
Absolutely. It really speaks to their agency, their ability to shape their own destiny.
Okay, so this kind of leads us to the emergence of early kingdoms, right?
Yes, exactly.
So our sources mention one kingdom called Salakanagra
Salakanagra.
in West Java.
Yeah, around the first century CE.
And some even consider this to be the first kingdom, right?
It is considered the first kingdom in some historical traditions.
Yeah, and it seems like trade played a big part in its growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there is a figure associated with it, a supposed founder named Akitiram.
Okay, Akitiram.
Right. But there is something we should keep in mind about Salakanagra.
What's that?
The archaeological evidence is pretty minimal.
Oh, okay.
So it's more of an early historical tradition based on manuscripts.
Like the Wangsakurta texts, right?
Exactly, the Wangsakurta text. So its existence is still debated among historians.
Okay, so that's Salakanagra. But then we have another kingdom, Kutai Martadipura.
Kutai Martadipura.
Now, this one seems to have more historical backing, right?
It does. Kutai is potentially older than the 4th century CE.
Wow, even older.
And it's much better documented through inscriptions called the Yupa inscriptions.
The Yupa inscription.
Yeah, and these were written in the Palava script.
Okay, so that Indian script we were talking about earlier.
Exactly, and they're also in Sanskrit. And these inscriptions tell us about early rulers like Kudunga, Aswarman, and Mulawarman. So this makes Kutai the oldest Hindu kingdom in Indonesia, with really strong written evidence.
Okay, so we've got these kingdoms starting to pop up. And with that, we also see some changes to social structures, right?
Yes, absolutely. The caste system, which is a social hierarchy, was introduced within these Hindu kingdoms.
So like a ranking of different social classes.
Yeah, you had the Raja at the top, the nobles, then the commoners, and finally the slaves.
Right, it was a very structured system. But even with all these new influences, it's important to remember that the local cultures didn't just disappear.
You're exactly right. They persisted and blended with these new teachings and ideas, leading to this fascinating cultural fusion.
Yeah, and that's something we see even today, right?
Absolutely. Think about the temple architecture, where you see indigenous motifs alongside Hindu and Buddhist iconography.
Oh yeah, that's a great example.
It really is a testament to this blending of cultures. And even older traditions, like the megalithic traditions, continued as well.
Megalithic traditions.
Those are the ancient practices involving those large stone structures that are often associated with rituals and ancestor worship.
Oh, interesting. So it was really a complex mix of old and new.
Very much so, a dynamic and evolving cultural landscape.
Okay, so if we take a step back and look at the big picture of Nusantara in the 1st century CE, what are the major takeaways? What should people really remember from all of this?
I think the biggest thing is the transition from local communities to kingdoms. That's a huge shift.
Yeah, that's a pretty fundamental change.
Right. And then there's the shift from indigenous belief systems to incorporating Hinduism and Buddhism.
So a religious transformation as well.
Yeah, and then finally the adoption of written culture, at least among the elites.
Okay, so big changes in politics, religion, and even how information is recorded and shared.
Exactly, and all this was happening during this period.
And it wasn't just the starting point, right? These changes set the stage for even more powerful kingdoms later on.
You got it. This era was essential for the rise of kingdoms like Tarumanagara, Sriwijaya, and Mataram Kuno. These were really important kingdoms.
And their roots go back to this early period.
Precisely. It all started with connection and adaptation.
So if I can summarize what we've talked about, it seems like Nusantara's location was key. It made it this trade hub, which brought Indian ideas and influence peacefully. This led to the emergence of early kingdoms like Kutai and Salakanagra. But it's important to remember that the evidence for Salakanagra is still being debated.
Okay.
And alongside all of this, we see social and cultural change happening. But it wasn't about erasing the old, it was about blending and creating something new.
Absolutely. I think that's a really important point. It was a time of immense change, but it was driven by both external influences and the internal strength of local cultures.
A real dynamic period. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we see this kind of cultural fusion throughout history? You know, where societies take ideas from elsewhere, blend them with their own traditions, and create something entirely new.
Yeah, makes you think.
It really does. And I bet there are examples of this kind of synthesis happening all around us today, maybe even in ways we don't even realize. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me. It's been really fascinating.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, everybody.
See you then.
Thank you for watching this video. Hopefully useful. Don't forget to like and subscribe.